Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it. Then let's evaluate together. The spotlight burned brighter than I'd expected. I stood in the middle of a conference room at the Palmer House in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where chandeliers drip with history and every whisper feels like it's being recorded. My red dress hugged my curves, bold as a dare, but my hands trembled just enough to betray the nerves I was trying to hide. Beside me, Ethan Caldwell gripped my hand, his palm warm and steady against mine. The man who'd built an empire from nothing, whose name was plastered on skyscrapers and Forbes covers, looked out at the sea of reporters and said the words that turned my world upside down. "Maya Thompson isn't just my business partner," he said, his voice low but firm, cutting through the hum of camera shutters. "She's the woman I love." The room erupted. Questions flew like darts. Who is she? How long has this been going on? What does this mean for Caldwell Enterprises? But Ethan didn't flinch. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, a quiet promise that we were in this together. I felt the weight of every eye on me, from the skeptical journalists to the suits in the back who'd probably bet against us from the start. My heart pounded so hard I was sure the microphones caught it. This wasn't just a press conference. It was a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. And as I stood there, head high despite the chaos, I couldn't help but wonder, how did we get here? How did a girl from Englewood end up holding hands with a billionaire in front of the world? Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment when I didn't even know Ethan Caldwell's name, when all I had was a dream bigger than my bank account and a chip on my shoulder the size of Lake Michigan. Because to understand why this moment mattered, why it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, you need to know where I came from and what it took to get here. My office at Horizon Agency wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Tucked into a corner of the 20th floor in the Loop, it had a view of the Chicago River that glittered like a postcard on good days. On bad days, like when the wind howled and the windows rattled, it just reminded me how high I'd climbed, and how far I could fall. My desk was a mess of sketches, coffee mugs, and post-it notes with half-baked taglines. A framed photo from my Northwestern graduation sat on the shelf, my mom's arm around me, both of us grinning like we'd just won the lottery. In a way, we had. That degree was my ticket out of Englewood, the South Side neighborhood where dreams usually got buried under the weight of reality. I was 32, the youngest executive creative director Horizon had ever hired, and I'd fought tooth and nail for it. Growing up, I'd heard every excuse in the book about why I wouldn't make it. My high school art teacher once told me I wasn't polished enough for the creative world, code for not white enough, not rich enough, not connected enough. I carried that memory like a scar, and every campaign I pitched, every award I won, was my way of proving her wrong. That morning, I was prepping for the biggest pitch of my career, Caldwell Enterprises, the kind of client that could put Horizon on the map and cement my name as someone who didn't just play the game, but changed it. My team had spent weeks on the deck, mood boards, data projections, a video concept that was bold enough to make even me nervous. I stood in front of the mirror in the office bathroom, smoothing my navy blazer and checking my braids for any stray strands. "You got this," I muttered to my reflection, ignoring the knot in my stomach. Back at my desk, Tasha, my work wife and the only person who could match my coffee addiction, leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. Tasha was a media planner with a knack for reading people and a laugh that could fill a room. She wore bright yellow sneakers with her pencil skirt because, as she put it, life's too short for boring shoes. "You ready to slay this pitch, Maya?" she asked, smirking. "Or you still freaking out?" I rolled my eyes, tossing a pen at her. "I don't freak out, Tasha. I strategize." "Uh-huh. That's why you've checked that presentation like 10 times this morning?" She dodged the pen and grinned. "Chill, girl. You're Maya Thompson. You make brands beg for you." I laughed, but her words hit deeper than I let on. Truth was, I didn't just want Caldwell Enterprises to sign with us. I needed them to. In this industry, you're only as good as your last win, and I'd spent too many years being the underdog to let this slip. I wasn't just pitching a campaign. I was pitching my worth. "Let's do this," I said, grabbing my laptop and heading for the conference room. Tasha gave me a mock salute, her voice trailing after me. "Kill it, boss." The Horizon conference room was all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed money but felt cold as a freezer. My team was already there. 3 other creatives, all younger than me, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I didn't blame them. Caldwell Enterprises wasn't just a big fish. It was a whale. Real estate, tech, philanthropy. They had their hands in everything, and their CEO, Ethan Caldwell, was a legend. Self-made, brilliant, and according to the rumors, kind of a hard ass. Not that I cared. I'd pitched to worse. I was arranging my materials when the door opened, and a hush fell over the room. Ethan Caldwell walked in, flanked by 2 assistants who looked like they'd been trained to anticipate his every blink. He was taller than I'd pictured, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders under a navy suit that probably cost more than my rent. His hair was dark, just starting to gray at the temples, and his eyes, God, those eyes, were a sharp green that seemed to see everything at once. He didn't smile, but there was something about him, a quiet intensity that made the air feel heavier. I'd seen his face before, on magazine covers, in those 30 under 30 lists he'd topped a decade ago, but up close, he was different, less polished, more human. He nodded at my team, then took a seat at the head of the table, his assistants hovering like Secret Service agents. One of them, a guy with a clipboard, leaned in to whisper something, but Ethan waved him off. "Let's get started," he said, his voice deep and clipped, like he had better places to be. I cleared my throat, ignoring the way my pulse kicked up a notch. "Focus, Maya." I launched into the pitch, my slides clicking smoothly as I walked them through our vision. A campaign that didn't just sell Caldwell's properties, but told the stories of the people who lived in them. Families, artists, small business owners, the heartbeat of Chicago. I'd poured everything into this, and as I spoke, I felt the room shift. My team sat up straighter. The assistant stopped typing. And Ethan. Ethan was watching me. Not just listening. Watching. Like he was trying to figure me out, piece by piece. I met his gaze, refusing to look away, even when my stomach did a little flip. I'd pitched to CEOs before, celebrities even, but none of them had made me feel like I was being seen for the first time. "We're not just building ads," I said, wrapping up. "We're building trust. Show people that Caldwell Enterprises isn't just about skyscrapers, it's about homes. That's the Chicago way." Silence. Then Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his fingers steepled. "Interesting angle, Miss Thompson," he said, and I caught the faintest trace of a smile. "You talk about the Chicago way like it's personal. Why's that?" I didn't miss a beat. "Because it is, Mr. Caldwell. I grew up in Englewood, South Side. Those streets aren't just a backdrop for your billboards. They're where I learned what community means. If you want authenticity, I'm your girl." A murmur rippled through the room, and I realized I might have gone too far. Calling out a billionaire's privilege in front of his team wasn't exactly protocol, but Ethan didn't look offended. If anything, he looked intrigued. "Englewood," he said, like he was testing the word. "That's a long way from here." "Not as far as you'd think," I shot back, holding his gaze. He nodded slowly, then asked a question about our budget projections. Sharp, thoughtful, the kind of thing that cuts straight to the core. We went back and forth for a few minutes, and I could feel the energy in the room shifting again. My team relaxed. The assistant scribbled furiously. And Ethan, he wasn't just engaged. He was in it, challenging me in a way that made me sharper, better. By the time I wrapped up, my throat was dry, but I felt electric. Ethan stood, buttoning his jacket. "I'll need to review this with my board," he said, his tone neutral. "But I'll be in touch, Ms. Thompson." He held out his hand, and when I shook it, his grip lingered a second longer than it should have. His eyes locked on mine, and for one heartbeat, it was just us. No team, no assistants, no conference room. Then he let go and walked out, leaving me wondering what the hell had just happened. Back in my office, I collapsed into my chair, adrenaline still buzzing. Tasha poked her head in, her grin wide enough to light up the city. "So? Spill the tea, Maya. Did you kill it or what?" I laughed, rubbing my temples. "I didn't crash and burn, if that's what you mean. But Caldwell, he's intense. Intense like he's a jerk, or intense like he's kinda hot?" She waggled her eyebrows, and I threw a balled-up Post-it at her. "Get out of here with that nonsense," I said, but I couldn't stop the smile creeping onto my face. "He's just not what I expected." "Uh-huh," Tasha smirked. "You better watch out, girl. Men like that, they're trouble with a capital T." She wasn't wrong. I'd spent my whole career keeping my head down, dodging distractions, proving I belonged in rooms where people like me were usually invisible. Ethan Caldwell was a distraction I couldn't afford, not when this pitch could make or break everything I'd worked for. Still, as I stared at my laptop, the memory of his handshake, his voice, his eyes, stuck with me like a song I couldn't shake. That night, I sat on my couch in my Wicker Park apartment, a glass of wine in hand, replaying the meeting. Englewood felt like a lifetime ago. Block parties with my cousins, my mom's voice calling me in for dinner, the sound of sirens mixing with laughter. I'd fought so hard to leave that behind, to build something bigger, but standing across from Ethan today, I'd felt something new. Not just ambition, not just pride, something dangerous, like the spark of a fire I wasn't sure I could control. I didn't know it then, but that spark was about to ignite everything. My career, my heart, my entire world. And when it did, I'd have to decide. Was I brave enough to step into the flames? Or would I play it safe and stay in the shadows? If you've ever felt like you're fighting to be seen, to prove you're more than what the world expects, then this story's for you. Maya Thompson's just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button to follow her journey with Ethan, because love like this, it's worth every risk. And drop a comment below. What do you think Maya's gonna do when the stakes get even higher? The email came at 10 p.m., just as I was about to call it a night. I was sprawled on my couch in my Wicker Park apartment, a half-eaten slice of pizza on the coffee table, my laptop balanced on my knees. The subject line read, Caldwell Enterprises, Next Steps. My heart did a little flip, not just because it was about the pitch, but because I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Maya, it started. No formal Ms. Thompson, which threw me for a loop. The board's impressed with your vision. I'd like to discuss refining the campaign. Can you meet tomorrow, 7 p.m., my office? Ethan. I read it twice, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Something about the way he'd written my name felt personal, like he was saying it out loud in that deep, steady voice of his. I told myself I was overthinking it. This was business, big, career-defining business. But as I typed a quick, sounds good, see you then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something bigger than a contract. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights and long calls. Horizon Agency had landed the Caldwell account, and I was the point person, which meant working closer with Ethan than I'd expected. His office in Gold Coast was a world away from Horizon's glass and steel vibe, dark wood floors, a wall of bookshelves stuffed with everything from tech journals to poetry by Langston Hughes, and a view of Lake Michigan that made you forget the city's noise. There was a framed photo on his desk, just him and a younger woman, maybe his sister, laughing at some beach. It was the only thing in the room that felt soft, unguarded. Our meeting started out strictly professional. I'd walk him through storyboards. He'd fire back questions about ROI and audience reach, and we'd debate until the janitors started vacuuming the halls. But there was this undercurrent. Like when he'd lean across the table to point at a slide, his sleeve brushing my arm, and I'd catch a hint of his cologne. Woodsy, warm, distracting. Or when he'd laugh at one of my sarcastic comments, his eyes crinkling in a way that made him less CEO and more human. One night we were holed up in his office, takeout containers scattered between laptops and mock-ups. The clock said 11:30, but neither of us was ready to call it quits. I was pitching a new tagline, "Build Your Chicago," and Ethan was pushing back as usual. "It's bold," he said, leaning back in his chair, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. "But it's almost too safe. Chicago's not just about building, it's about dreaming, risking it all." I raised an eyebrow, sipping my lukewarm coffee. "You're telling me about risk. I'm the one who grew up dodging trouble in Englewood while you were, what, yachting with the Kennedys?" He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that filled the room. "Yachting? Maya, I grew up in a 2-bedroom in Hyde Park. My dad was a mechanic. I didn't exactly have a silver spoon." I blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, what? You're not some trust fund kid?" "Nope." He grinned, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Maybe pride, maybe defiance. "Everything I've got, I built. Same as you." That hit me harder than I expected. I'd pegged him as another rich guy who'd had the world handed to him, but here he was, rewriting the story I'd built in my head. We sat there for a second just looking at each other, the air between us charged with something I couldn't name. "Okay, fine," I said, breaking the silence. "You want risk? Let's make the campaign about dreamers, people like us who came from nothing and made something. That's the real Chicago." He nodded slowly, like he was seeing me for the first time. "Now that's a campaign I can sell to my board." It was a Wednesday when things shifted for good. We'd been working late again, and I was exhausted, my eyes burning from staring at screens. Ethan must have noticed because he pushed his laptop aside and stood up, stretching. "You ever take a break, Maya?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. I snorted, shutting my notebook. "Breaks are for people who don't have bills to pay." He chuckled, but there was something serious in his expression. "I'm serious. You're killing it, but you can't run on fumes forever. Come on, let me show you something." I raised an eyebrow. "What, like a PowerPoint on work-life balance?" "Better." He grabbed his jacket, motioning for me to follow. "Trust me." Against my better judgment, I did. 20 minutes later, we were in his car, a sleek black Audi that probably cost more than my apartment, heading south. The city lights blurred past, and I couldn't help but steal glances at him. Ethan in a suit was one thing, but Ethan in a casual sweater, one hand on the wheel, humming along to some old Stevie Wonder song on the radio, that was dangerous. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to sound annoyed but failing. "Patience, Thompson," he said, smirking. "You'll see." We pulled up to the Green Mill, a legendary blues club in Uptown. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a warm glow over the sidewalk. Inside, the air smelled of whiskey and history, the kind of place where every table had a story. A sax player was wailing on stage, and the crowd, locals, not tourists, was swaying, lost in the music. Ethan led me to a corner booth, ordering us drinks without asking what I wanted. "Bourbon, neat," he said to the bartender, then glanced at me. "Unless you're a martini girl." "Bourbon's fine," I said, trying not to smile. "But you're on thin ice, assuming you know me like that." He laughed, and we settled in, the music wrapping around us like a blanket. For the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders relax. Ethan wasn't a client here, wasn't a billionaire. He was just a guy who knew every word to a Muddy Waters song and leaned in close when I talked, like my stories mattered. "So," I said, swirling my drink, "what's a big shot like you doing in a place like this? Shouldn't you be at some rooftop bar downtown sipping champagne?" He grinned, but his eyes were serious. "This is my Chicago, Maya. My dad used to bring me here when I was a kid. Said the blues taught you how to feel things you couldn't say out loud." I nodded, thinking of my own dad, gone too soon, who'd play gospel records on Sundays and tell me I could be anything. "Yeah," I said softly. "I get that." We talked for hours, about growing up, about the dreams we'd buried to build the lives we had now. I told him about my first job, spilling coffee on a creative director's desk during an interview, and he laughed until he couldn't breathe. He told me about wanting to be a poet in college, before his dad's heart attack forced him to take over the family business. It was like peeling back layers, seeing the man behind the headlines. "You're not what I expected," I said at one point, the bourbon loosening my tongue. "Good or bad?" he asked, his voice low, his knee brushing mine under the table. I met his gaze, my pulse racing. "Good. Too good, maybe." He didn't say anything, just looked at me like I was the only person in the room. The music slowed, a sultry melody that made the air feel heavier. I felt it then, the pull, the spark I'd been ignoring since that first handshake. And when he reached for my hand as we stood to leave, his fingers threading through mine to guide me through the crowd, I didn't pull away. Outside, the night was crisp, the streetlights casting long shadows. Ethan didn't let go of my hand, and I didn't make him. We stood by his car, neither of us ready to break whatever spell had settled over us. "Thanks for tonight," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I didn't know I needed it." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, see the faint stubble on his jaw. "You deserve more nights like this, Maya," he said, his voice rough with something that wasn't just gratitude. "You deserve a lot more." My breath caught. I knew what he meant, what he wasn't saying, and God help me, I wanted to lean in, to let whatever this was take over. But the voice in my head, the one that had gotten me through Englewood, through rejection, through every no I'd ever heard, was screaming at me to stop. He was my client. My career was on the line. This wasn't a rom-com. This was real life, and real life had consequences. "I should go," I said, stepping back, my hand slipping from his. He nodded, but the look in his eyes, part disappointment, part understanding, stayed with me as I hailed a cab. All the way home, I could still feel his touch, like a phantom limb I hadn't known I'd lost. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Ethan. Green Mill was a start. Let's keep finding Chicago together. No mention of work, no pretense of a meeting, just him, reaching out, daring me to say yes. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. I thought about Tasha's warning, trouble with a capital T, and the pitch that had brought us together, the one I'd poured my heart into. I thought about Englewood, my mom's tired hands, the girl I'd been who'd sworn she'd never let anything hold her back. And then I thought about Ethan's laugh, his hand in mine, the way he'd looked at me like I was more than a name on a business card. I typed a reply before I could talk myself out of it. Name, the time, and place. As I hit send, I felt it, the spark catching, the fire starting. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to find out. I should have known it couldn't stay simple. That spark between Ethan and me, the one that lit up that night at the Green Mill, was starting to feel less like a warm glow and more like a wildfire. Beautiful, but dangerous if you got too close. For a few weeks, we'd been dancing around it, meeting in places where no one would recognize us, stealing moments that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. But the real world doesn't let you hide forever. and I was about to learn that the hard way. It started with a dinner in Evanston, at a little Italian spot called Trattoria Doc, tucked away on a quiet street. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles that flickered just enough to make you forget the chaos outside. Ethan had picked it because it was far from the loop, far from anyone who might care about a billionaire and an ad exec sharing a plate of spaghetti carbonara. He wore a gray sweater instead of his usual suit, his hair a little messy, like he'd run his hands through it one too many times. I liked him like this, unguarded, almost boyish. "You ever think about getting out of Chicago?" he asked, twirling his fork in the pasta, his eyes catching the candlelight. I laughed, sipping my Chianti. "What, like move to the suburbs and get a minivan?" "Nah, I'm good." "Not the suburbs," he grinned, leaning closer. "Somewhere totally different. Paris, maybe, or New Orleans, somewhere you can just be." I raised an eyebrow. "You trying to whisk me away, Caldwell? 'Cause I got a job, you know, and rent, and a cat who'd never forgive me." He chuckled, but there was something serious in his expression. "I'm just saying, Maya, you're bigger than Horizon, bigger than this city. You could do anything." His words hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so long fighting to prove I belonged, first in Englewood, then in boardrooms, that I'd never stopped to ask what I wanted if the fight was over. I looked at him, at the way his fingers brushed mine when he passed me the breadbasket, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. "Careful," I said, keeping my tone light. "You keep talking like that, I might start believing you. Maybe you should," he said softly, and for a second it was just us. No contracts, no titles, no rules. That night after dinner, we walked along Lake Michigan, the water dark and endless under the stars. He slipped his arm around my waist, pulling me close against the October chill. I let myself lean into him, my head against his shoulder, and for once, I didn't think about what could go wrong. I just let myself feel it, the steadiness of his heartbeat, the quiet promise of his touch. When he kissed me under a streetlight, slow and deliberate, it wasn't just a kiss, it was a question, and my answer was the way I kissed him back, my hands finding his face, my body saying what words couldn't. Back in the real world, though, things weren't so dreamy. At Horizon, the Caldwell campaign was in full swing, and I was juggling deadlines, focus groups, and a team that was starting to fray at the edges. Tasha was my rock, as always, slipping me coffee during marathon meetings and cracking jokes to keep me sane. But there was someone else circling, someone I should have seen coming. Ryan Carter. Ryan was another creative director at Horizon, a few years older than me, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He'd been gunning for the regional director spot ever since I got promoted, and he wasn't subtle about it. During our weekly status meetings, he'd interrupt my updates with suggestions that were really just ways to undermine me. I'd handled guys like him before, smug, entitled, always looking for a weak spot. But Ryan was different. He was smart, and that made him dangerous. One morning, we were in the conference room, going over the latest Caldwell ad mock-ups. I was presenting a concept for a video series, real Chicagoans talking about what home meant to them, when Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking like he'd just won the lottery. "Nice work, Maya," he said, his tone dripping with fake praise. "But don't you think it's a little safe? Caldwell's a big player. They might want something flashier." I kept my cool, even though I wanted to toss my marker at his head. Flashy doesn't build trust, Ryan. People connect with stories, not CGI explosions. He shrugged, glancing around the room like he was rallying an audience. "Sure, but stories need juice. Maybe you're too close to this one to see it." The dig wasn't lost on me, or on Tasha, who shot me a look that said, "This dude's begging for it." I forced a smile, flipping to the next slide. "Appreciate the feedback, Ryan. I'll keep it in mind." Later in my office, Tasha shut the door and didn't waste time. "Okay, what's up with Ryan? He's acting like you stole his lunch money. I sighed, rubbing my temples. He's just sore I got the Caldwell account. He'll get over it. Tasha crossed her arms, her yellow earrings swinging. That man's got it out for you. I heard him talking to one of the VPs yesterday, dropping hints about how you're spending a lot of time with Caldwell. Watch your back, Maya. Her words stuck with me, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I'd been careful with Ethan. No meetings in public, no texts that could be misread. But I knew how rumors worked in this industry. One whisper could turn into a headline, and I'd worked too hard to let someone like Ryan tear me down. The real test came a few weeks later, at a gala for Caldwell Enterprises at the Drake Hotel. Ethan had invited me, saying it was a chance to network with his board and show off Horizon's work. I'd been to fancy events before, award nights, client dinners, but this was different. This was Ethan's world, and I wasn't sure I'd fit in. I spent an hour picking out a dress, settling on a black silk number that hugged my curves without screaming for attention. Tasha helped me with my makeup, her usual teasing replaced with a quiet pep talk. You belong there, Maya, she said, brushing bronzer across my cheeks. Don't let anybody make you feel small. The Drake's ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers and power suits, the air thick with perfume and ambition. I walked in alone, Ethan's instructions clear. We'd keep our distance to avoid gossip. He was already there, working the room, shaking hands with men in tuxes and women in gowns that cost more than my car. He caught my eye from across the room, his smile quick but warm, and I felt a little steadier. That didn't last. The moment I started mingling, I felt the weight of every glance. A woman in pearls gave me a once-over, her lips pursing like she was sizing up a knockoff purse. A guy in a bow tie asked what I did, then lost interest when I said advertising instead of hedge funds. I was used to standing out. Being the only black woman in the room wasn't new, but this felt different, like I was on trial, and no one had told me the charges. Then I met Olivia Harper. She glided over during a break in the speeches, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, her emerald dress catching the light. She was maybe 35 with the kind of poise that screamed old money. Ethan had mentioned her once, a childhood friend, but the way she carried herself said she was more than that. Maya Thompson, right? She said, extending a manicured hand. Her smile was perfect, but her eyes were sharp, like she was cataloging every detail. I've heard about your work with Ethan's campaign. Quite the splash. Thanks, I said, matching her smile. Just doing my job. Oh, don't be modest. She sipped her champagne, her gaze never leaving me. Ethan's been singing your praises. He's always had a thing for unique talent. The word unique landed like a jab, but I didn't flinch. Good to know, I said. He's got a sharp eye for what works. Her laugh was light, practiced. He does, but you know how he is. Always chasing the next big thing. I just hope he doesn't lose sight of what's expected of him. Before I could respond, Ethan appeared, his hand brushing my elbow as he greeted us both. Olivia, Maya, glad you two met. His voice was warm, but I caught the tension in his jaw, like he knew Olivia's game. Of course, Olivia said, her smile widening. Maya's delightful. We were just talking about how exciting her work is. Ethan's eyes flicked to me, a silent question. I gave him a small nod, letting him know I could handle it. But as he moved on to another group, Olivia leaned in, her voice low. He's a good man, Maya, but men like him, they always come back to what they know. She drifted away, leaving me with a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I grabbed a flute of champagne from a passing tray, my hands unsteady. Olivia's words weren't just a warning, they were a map of Ethan's world, one where I was a guest, not a resident. Later by the bar, I overheard two investors talking, their voices low but not low enough. Caldwell needs to settle down, one said, swirling his whiskey. The board's antsy. A guy like him can't be playing around with distractions. Harper's daughter would be perfect, the other replied. Good family, good optics. Investors love stability. I froze, my glass halfway to my lips. They didn't say my name, but they didn't have to. I was the distraction, the thing that didn't fit. I looked across the room at Ethan, laughing with a group of suits, his charm effortless. He belonged here, in a way I never would. And for the first time, I wondered if Olivia was right, if what we had could survive outside our stolen moments. I left the gala early, texting Ethan that I had a headache. It wasn't a lie, not really. My head was spinning, but it wasn't from the champagne. It was from the truth I'd been dodging. Loving Ethan wasn't just risky. It was a gamble with everything I'd built. My career, my reputation, my heart. And as I stood in my apartment later, staring at the city lights through my window, I couldn't shake the feeling that the fire we'd started was about to burn us both. I thought I knew pressure. Growing up in Englewood, I'd learned to keep my head down when sirens wailed, to smile through rejection, to work twice as hard for half the credit. But nothing prepared me for the moment my phone started buzzing like a hornet's nest, pulling my whole world apart in the middle of a Tuesday morning. I was in Horizon's conference room, halfway through a presentation for a smaller client, a boutique hotel chain that wanted a vibrant rebrand. My team was scribbling notes, the projector humming, when my phone vibrated so hard it skidded across the table. I ignored it at first, focusing on my slides, but it didn't stop. One buzz, then two, then a dozen, like the damn thing was possessed. Tasha, sitting across from me, raised an eyebrow, her pen pausing mid-scribble. "You gonna get that, Maya?" she mouthed, half teasing, half concerned. I shook my head, forcing a smile. "Later," I said, clicking to the next slide. But then Tasha's phone lit up too, and her eyes widened as she glanced at the screen. Before I could ask what was wrong, she slipped out of her chair and hurried to my side, her face drained of its usual spark. "Maya," she whispered, shoving a sticky note into my hand. "Check your phone. Now." I frowned, my stomach twisting, but I kept my voice steady. "Can it wait?" "No." Her tone was sharp, urgent. "Trust me." I excused myself, stepping into the hallway, my heart pounding like I'd just run a sprint. The second I unlocked my phone, notifications flooded in. Texts, emails, missed calls, Twitter alerts. My fingers trembled as I opened the first message, from Tasha, a screenshot from some gossip blog called Chi-Town Buzz. The headline screamed, "Billionaire Ethan Caldwell's mystery woman. Who's the lucky lady?" Below it was a grainy photo, clearly taken with a phone. Me and Ethan sitting across from each other at Trattoria Dock in Evanston, his hand resting on mine, my head thrown back in a laugh I could still hear. We looked happy. Too happy. The kind of happy that didn't belong on a gossip site for the world to dissect. The caption read, "Spotted. Caldwell Enterprises CEO cozying up with an unidentified woman. Is this a fling or something more?" I scrolled down, my throat tightening. The comments were a cesspool. "Gold digger alert," one said. "Caldwell's slumming at LOL," said another. Someone had dug up my LinkedIn, piecing together that I worked at Horizon, and the speculation was brutal. She's just using him for a promotion. Bet she's not even that good at her job. And the worst, the one that made my eyes sting. Why her? He could do so much better. I leaned against the wall, the hallway spinning. This wasn't just gossip. It was my life, my career, my name, being torn apart by strangers who didn't know me. I thought about my mom, Gloria, who'd worked double shifts to get me through school, who'd be reading this crap if it spread far enough. I thought about Horizon, about the clients who trusted me, about Ryan's smug face if he got wind of this, and Ethan. God, what was he thinking right now? My phone buzzed again. A text from him. Maya, I saw it. I'm handling it. Call me when you can. I didn't call. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to think, to breathe, to figure out how to keep this from swallowing everything I'd built. But before I could even process, Tasha poked her head out of the conference room. Maya, you okay? She asked, her voice soft but urgent. What's going on? I handed her my phone, too numb to explain. She scanned the screen, her jaw dropping. Oh, hell no. Who took this? And why are people such garbage? I don't know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but I need to fix this. By the time I got back to my office, the news had spread like wildfire. My inbox was a war zone. Messages from colleagues, industry contacts, even a couple of tabloid reporters fishing for quotes. I had 17 missed calls, 3 from Ethan, the rest from people I hadn't spoken to in months. I shut my door, sank into my chair, and called my mom. If anyone could talk me off this ledge, it was her. Baby girl, she answered, her voice warm but wary. You sound like you're carrying the world. What's wrong? I told her everything, not just the photo, but Ethan, the gala, the way I'd been falling for him despite every warning sign. She listened, like she always did, and when I was done, she sighed, long and heavy. Maya, you know they're going to try to tear you down, she said. They always do when you shine too bright, but you're stronger than this. You hear me? I hear you, I said, but my voice cracked. I don't know if I can keep doing this, Ma. It's too much. You don't have to decide today, she said, but don't let their noise drown out your heart. You've never been one to run from a fight. I hung up, her words echoing but not quite sinking in. I was about to call Ethan when my office phone rang. It was Walter, one of Horizon's board members and the closest thing I had to a mentor. His voice was all business, no warmth. Maya, we need to talk, he said. Now. The boardroom felt like a courtroom. Walter sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 other execs whose names I barely registered. I stood across from them, my hands clasped to keep them from shaking, my blazer suddenly too tight. We've seen the reports, Walter said, sliding a printout of the Chi-Town Buzz article across the table. This situation with Caldwell raises concerns. I swallowed, keeping my chin up. My personal life hasn't affected my work, Walter. You know that. He sighed, his eyes tired but firm. It's not about your work, Maya. It's about perception. Our clients expect professionalism, trust. This kind of publicity, especially with a client as big as Caldwell, creates conflicts of interest. We've had calls already. Calls? I frowned, my stomach dropping. From who? That's not the point. One of the other execs cut in, a woman with a sharp bob and sharper eyes. The point is, we can't afford distractions. Not now. I wanted to scream. Distraction? I delivered the Caldwell account on a silver platter, worked nights and weekends to make it flawless. But I knew what this was. I'd seen it before. The way people clutched their pearls when someone like me stepped out of line. Too loud, too bold, too... me. What are you saying? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Walter leaned forward, his hands folded. We're asking you to take a leave of absence, just until this blows over. It's for your own good, Maya. For my good? I repeated, heat rising in my cheeks. I've given everything to this agency, my campaigns, my ideas. Those are what got us Caldwell in the first place. And we appreciate that, Walter said, but his tone was patronizing, like he was talking to a kid. But perception is reality in this business. You know that. I stood there, my nails digging into my palms, and realized something. They weren't just asking me to step back. They were telling me I'd become a liability, Not because of my work, but because of who I was, who I dared to love. "I'll think about it," I said, turning for the door before I said something I'd regret. That night I called Ethan. He picked up on the first ring, his voice tight with worry. "Maya, thank God. Are you okay?" "No," I said, pacing my apartment, the city lights blurring through my tears. "I'm not okay. My job's on the line, Ethan. My life is on the line. And you're... what? Handling it?" "I'm trying," he said, frustration creeping into his tone. "My PR team's drafting a statement. They'll spin it as a private matter, ask for respect." "A statement?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "Saying what? That I'm your friend? Your colleague? Or are you just going to pretend this never happened?" "Maya, that's not fair," he said, softer now. "I'm doing everything I can to protect you." "Protect me?" I laughed, bitter. "From what?" "The truth. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're protecting your company, not us." There was a long pause, the kind that felt like a chasm opening between us. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. "I care about you, Maya, more than you know. But I've got thousands of people depending on me, employees, investors. I can't just—" "I know," I said, cutting him off again. "I get it. You've got a world to run. I'm just not sure I fit in it." I hung up before he could respond, my chest aching like I'd been punched. I sank onto my couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how something that felt so right could go so wrong. The next morning, I was a mess. Puffy eyes, no appetite, my brain stuck on replay. I was about to call in sick when Tasha showed up at my door, a bag of donuts in one hand and a fierce look in her eyes. No wallowing," she said, pushing past me. "We're fixing this." "Tasha, there's nothing to fix," I said, flopping onto the couch. "My career's tanking, Ethan's in damage control, and the internet thinks I'm a gold digger. I'm done." She shoved a chocolate-glazed donut into my hand. "You're not done. You're Maya freaking Thompson. And I've got tea." I raised an eyebrow, biting into the donut despite myself. "What kind of tea?" She leaned in, her voice low. "Ryan." I overheard him bragging to one of the junior creatives yesterday, said he'd taken care of the Caldwell account, sounded real proud of himself. I froze, the donut halfway to my mouth. "You think he leaked the photo?" "I'd bet my sneakers on it," she said. "He's been gunning for you since day one, probably saw his chance to knock you down and took it." Anger flared in my chest, hot and sharp. Ryan, of course. I'd underestimated him, let his fake smiles fool me. But now? Now I was done playing nice. "Okay," I said, sitting up straighter. "If he wants a fight, he's got one." That afternoon I did something crazy. I called one of Horizon's biggest clients, a luxury watch brand we'd been pitching for months, directly. Ryan had been assigned to their account, but I knew his concepts were weak, all flash and no substance. I spent hours pulling together a new deck, one that leaned into heritage and craftsmanship, the kind of story I knew they'd eat up. By 5 p.m., I was on a Zoom call with their marketing VP, walking her through my ideas like my life depended on it. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," she said, her voice crackling with excitement. "Ryan's pitch was fine, but this is special. Can you lead the campaign?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." When I hung up, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in days. Ryan could play dirty, but I wasn't out of the game yet. I just bought myself a lifeline, and I wasn't letting go. That night, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another reporter, but the message stopped me cold. "Maya, it's Olivia Harper. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. Olivia, the woman who'd practically thrown shade at me at the gala, wanted to talk. Curiosity got the better of me, and I called her back. "Maya," she said, her voice smoother than I remembered. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" I asked, wary. "For underestimating you." She paused, and I could hear the clink of a glass, like she was sipping something. "I saw the news. It's ugly, and I'm sorry you're caught in it. But I need you to know something. Ethan's not playing a game with you. He's serious." I blinked, caught off guard. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've known him my whole life," she said, "and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. My family, his board, they want me to be his perfect match. But I don't want that life, Maya, and neither does he." I sat there stunned, trying to process her words. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying fight for him," she said, her voice firm. "If you love him, don't let them win. He's worth it. And so are you." When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope, not exactly, but a spark, a reminder of who I was. I wasn't just a scandal headline or a liability. I was Maya Thompson, the girl who'd clawed her way out of Englewood, who'd built a career from nothing. And maybe, just maybe, I was the woman who could rewrite this story. I thought I'd hit rock bottom when that photo of me and Ethan went viral, but I was wrong. Rock bottom isn't a moment. It's a slow slide, a creeping dread that builds until you're staring at the pieces of your life and wondering if they'll ever fit back together. For me, it started with a whisper campaign, a poison that spread faster than I could fight. The week after the Chi-Town Buzz article dropped, things got uglier. Someone, my money was on Ryan, fed more dirt to the tabloids. A new story popped up on a site called Windy City Scoop, claiming I'd seduced Ethan to secure the Caldwell account for Horizon. No proof, of course, just enough innuendo to make people raise eyebrows. My Instagram, which I'd kept professional with campaign shots and the occasional cat pic, was flooded with hate. Homewrecker. Opportunist. Know your place. I turned off comments, but the words stuck, sharp as glass under my skin. At Horizon, the air was thick with tension. Colleagues who used to high-five me in the halls now avoided eye contact. Tasha was the only one who didn't flinch, slipping into my office with coffee and a fierce look that said she'd fight anyone who came for me. "These people are vultures," she said one morning, slamming a latte on my desk. "Don't let them get in your head, Maya." "Too late," I muttered, staring at my laptop. I'd been Googling myself. An idiot move, but I couldn't stop. Every click was a new knife. Articles questioning my credentials, ex-posts calling me Caldwell's side piece, even a meme comparing me to a reality TV villain. I closed the tab, my hands shaking. "Tasha, how do I keep going when it feels like the whole city's watching?" She sat across from me, her yellow earrings catching the light. "You keep going, because you're you. The girl who pitched a campaign that made a billionaire sit up and listen. They can talk all they want, but they can't take that away." Her words helped, but only so much. The truth was, I was drowning, not just in the gossip, but in the silence from Ethan. Since our fight on the phone, he'd gone quiet. Brief texts, all business, like in meetings, "we'll call soon." I got it. He was a CEO, juggling a company that employed thousands. But every unanswered message felt like a brick in a wall growing between us. Then came the real blow. I was grabbing lunch at a food truck in Millennium Park, trying to clear my head with a jerk chicken taco, when my phone buzzed with an email from Walter, the board member who'd suggested my leave of absence. The subject line was cold, urgent. Meeting today, 2 p.m. I knew what was coming before I even walked into the boardroom. Walter sat at the head of the table, his face grim, flanked by the same sharp-eyed exec from last time. Ryan was there too, leaning back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. My stomach churned, but I kept my shoulders squared, my voice steady. "What's this about?" I asked, taking the seat across from them. Walter slid a folder toward me, his sigh heavy. "Maya, we've had more complaints. Clients are concerned about the optics of your involvement with Caldwell. The watch brand you pitched to, they're thrilled with your ideas, but they're asking if Ryan can take lead." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Ryan?" I glanced at him, his smirk now a full-blown grin. "I built that pitch from scratch. They chose me." "And we're grateful," the female exec cut in, her tone clipped. "But we can't ignore the reality. This scandal is hurting our reputation. We're recommending a formal suspension, effective immediately." "Suspension?" The word tasted like ash. "For what? Doing my job? Or for having a life outside this place?" "It's not personal," Walter said, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "It's business." I stood, my chair scraping the floor. "Business? I've given you everything. Nights, weekends, my best ideas. And now you're throwing me under the bus because of some gossip rag?" Ryan finally spoke, his voice smooth as oil. "Maya, no one's saying you're not talented. But you've got to admit, this thing with Caldwell looks bad. Maybe stepping back is the smart play." I turned to him, my anger boiling over. "You'd love that, wouldn't you? Clear the way for you to swoop in and take credit?" His smirk faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. I knew I was right about him leaking that photo, even if I couldn't prove it yet. I grabbed my bag and walked out, ignoring Walter's call to come back. If they wanted to suspend me, fine. But I wasn't going down without a fight. That night, I was pacing my apartment, a glass of wine in hand, when my phone lit up with a new kind of nightmare. Another article, this time from a national outlet, digging into Ethan's past. They'd unearthed an old business deal, a tech startup he'd backed 10 years ago that tanked after he ignored red flags, costing investors millions. The headline was brutal. "Caldwell's reckless streak. Is his new romance another mistake?" My name wasn't mentioned, but the implication was clear. I was the latest in a line of bad decisions. I called Ethan, my hands shaking. He answered on the second ring, his voice strained. "Maya, I was just about to call you. Did you see it?" I asked, my voice tight. "They're dragging you through the mud now, too." "I know," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his tone. "My board's freaking out. Stock's down 5 points since this morning." I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. "Ethan, this is insane. They're acting like we're some kind of crime scene." He sighed, long and heavy. "I'm trying to fix it, Maya. My team's meeting with investors tomorrow. We'll issue a statement, shut down the rumors." "Another statement?" I snapped, my patience gone. "That's your answer for everything, isn't it? What about us? What about what we want?" There was a pause, the kind that made my chest ache. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "I've got a company to run, people who depend on me. I can't just—" "You can't just what?" I cut him off. "Hey, choose me? Be honest about us? Or is that too much to ask?" "Maya, it's not that simple," he said, frustration creeping in. "You know what's at stake." "Yeah," I said, my voice breaking. "I do, and I'm starting to think I'm not worth it to you." I hung up before he could respond, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't want to hear his excuses, his promises to handle it. I wanted him to fight for us, the way I'd been fighting for everything my whole life. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. It was a reporter from Windy City Scoop, a woman with a nasal voice who got straight to the point. "Ms. Thompson, I've got a source claiming you've been leaking info about Caldwell Enterprises to competitors," she said. "Care to comment?" I laughed, a bitter sound. "That's absurd. I've done nothing but work my ass off for that account." "So you deny it?" she pressed. Because my source is pretty convincing. I can keep your name out of it if you give me something else. Say, details about your relationship with Ethan Caldwell. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just gossip. It was a setup. Someone was trying to bury me, and they were playing dirty. No comment, I said, hanging up before I lost my temper. I sat there, my heart racing, trying to piece it together. Ryan? One of Ethan's rivals? Hell, maybe even someone on his board. Whoever it was, they wanted me gone, and they were willing to lie to make it happen. I felt like a boxer in the ring, taking hits from every angle, with no referee to call foul. I couldn't avoid Ethan forever, though. 2 days later, he texted, "Can we talk? In person. Please." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet diner in Lincoln Park, the kind of place with sticky tables and waitresses who called you hun. It was as far from his Gold Coast penthouse as you could get, which was probably why he picked it. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, his usual polish replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled button-down. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and despite everything, my heart twisted at the sight. "Maya," he said, standing as I approached, his voice rough. "Thank you for coming." I slid into the booth, keeping my distance. "You said you wanted to talk. So talk." He sat down, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. For the statement crap, for going quiet, for everything. This mess, it's killing me." "It's killing me too," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "But I'm the one losing my job, Ethan. I'm the one getting death threats on Twitter. You're still the guy with the corner office." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. "I know it's not fair. My board's on my back. The investors are panicking, and now this old deal's being dragged up to make me look reckless. They're saying I need to stabilize my image." "Stabilize?" I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "You mean find someone appropriate, like Olivia?" "No," he said quickly, his eyes locking on mine. "Not her. Not anyone. I don't want that life, Maya. I want—" "What?" I cut in, leaning forward. "What do you want, Ethan? Because I can't keep doing this, hiding, waiting for you to decide if I'm worth the risk." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back, my heart pounding. "I need to know," I said, my voice trembling. "Are you in this with me, all the way? Or am I just a complication you'll cut loose when it gets too hard?" His silence was louder than any answer. He looked down at the table, his hands clenched, and I felt something break inside me. I stood grabbing my coat. That's what I thought. "Maya, wait," he said, but I was already walking out, the diner's bell jingling behind me. The cold air hit my face, mixing with the tears I hadn't realized were falling. I'd spent my life fighting to be seen, to be enough, and I wasn't going to beg for it now, not even from him. I didn't expect him to show up at my apartment that night. It was past midnight, and I was in sweats, curled up with a pint of Ben & Jerry's, trying to drown my feelings in chocolate fudge brownie. When I heard the knock, I froze, thinking it was Tasha or maybe a neighbor. But there he was, standing in my hallway, his coat damp from the rain, his eyes raw with something I hadn't seen before. "You didn't let me finish," he said, his voice low but urgent. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "I heard enough." "No, you didn't." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the rain on him, feel the heat of his presence. "I'm not good at this, Maya. I've spent my life building walls, keeping people out, but you got through, and it scares the hell out of me because I don't know how to do this without screwing it up." My throat tightened, but I didn't move. "Then why are you here?" "Because I can't lose you," he said, his voice breaking. He reached for me, his hands finding my face, and before I could pull away, he kissed me. It wasn't soft or careful. It was desperate, like he was pouring everything he couldn't say into that moment. His lips were warm, insistent, and I felt my resolve crumble, my hands gripping his shirt as I kissed him back, just as desperate, just as lost. We stumbled into my apartment, the door clicking shut behind us. His hand slid down my back, pulling me closer, and I felt the world shrink to just us. No headlines, no boardrooms. Just the way his breath hitched when I touched him, the way my skin burned under his fingers. It wasn't about forgetting the fight. It was about remembering why we were fighting in the first place. But when we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, I stepped back, my heart still racing. "This doesn't fix everything," I said, my voice shaky. "I need more than this, Ethan. I need you to choose us." "I know," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Give me time, Maya. Please." I nodded, not because I was sure, but because I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. But as he left, the rain still falling outside, I knew we were standing on a knife's edge. One wrong move, and we'd both fall. I didn't sleep that night after Ethan left my apartment. His kiss lingered like a bruise, tender and raw, but his plea for time echoed louder. Time was the one thing I wasn't sure we had, not with the tabloids circling, my career hanging by a thread, and a city that seemed hell-bent on tearing us apart. I sat on my couch, the rain tapping my window, and wondered if love was supposed to feel this heavy, like carrying a weight you didn't choose but couldn't put down. The next morning, I dragged myself to a coffee shop in Wicker Park, hoping caffeine and a change of scenery would clear my head. The place was buzzing. Baristas calling out orders, laptops humming, the smell of espresso cutting through the fog in my brain. I was scrolling through my phone, avoiding the news, when a text from Tasha popped up. "Girl, check X, now." My stomach dropped. I opened the app, bracing for another hit piece, but what I saw stopped me cold. A post from an anonymous account, tagged with #Caldwell scandal, claiming Ethan's board was planning to oust him unless he cleaned up his mess, meaning me. The comments were a mix of outrage and glee, with people speculating about his replacement, my motives, even our non-existent wedding plans. I felt like I was watching a train wreck in slow motion, and I was tied to the tracks. I was about to call Tasha when my phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice tight, like he was holding back a storm. "Maya, we need to talk. Can you meet me at my office? It's important." I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the end call button. Part of me wanted to run, to cut my losses before this got worse. But another part, the stubborn part, the one that had gotten me through Englewood and every boardroom I'd walked into, knew I couldn't walk away without answers. "I'll be there in an hour," I said, and hung up before I could change my mind. Ethan's office felt different this time, less like a sanctuary and more like a war room. Papers were scattered across his desk. His tie was gone, and his sleeves were rolled up like he'd been fighting battles all night. He stood when I walked in, his eyes searching mine, but I kept my distance, arms crossed. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. "I found out who's been feeding the press. It wasn't just Ryan." I frowned, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" He stopped, his jaw tight. "My mother. She hired a PI to dig into us, into you. She's the one who tipped off that Windy City scoop reporter trying to scare you off. Thought if she made it bad enough, you'd leave." I stared at him, my mind reeling. His mother, the woman I'd never met, whose shadow had loomed over every gala, every whispered conversation about stability. I'd known she didn't approve, but this was something else. It was betrayal, cold and calculated. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why go that far?" Ethan's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Because she thinks she's protecting me. Protecting the company, the family name. She spent her life building this idea of who I'm supposed to be, and you don't fit it." His words cut deeper than I expected, not because they were new, but because they were true. I didn't fit. Not in her world, not in the boards, maybe not even in Ethan's, no matter how much we wanted to pretend otherwise. I sank into a chair, my hands gripping the armrests. "So what now?" I asked, looking up at him. "You gonna let her win?" He knelt in front of me, his hands resting on mine, warm and steady. "No," he said, his voice fierce. "I'm done letting other people write my story. I told her this morning. She's out of my decisions, out of my life, if she can't respect you." I blinked, stunned. "You... what?" "I mean it, Maya." His eyes held mine, unyielding. "I've spent too long playing their game. Board meetings, investor dinners, pretending I'm someone I'm not. I'm not losing you to that." My throat tightened, tears pricking my eyes. I wanted to believe him, but the weight of everything, the articles, the suspension, the hate, was still there, pressing down. "Ethan, this isn't just about your mom. It's the whole damn world. Your board, your investors, they'll never accept me." "Then they don't get me," he said, his voice low but certain. "I'm stepping down as CEO." I froze, my breath catching. "You're serious?" He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I've been thinking about it for a while. The company's stable, but it's not my soul anymore. I want to do something real, something like what you've always talked about, giving back to places like Englewood. I'm starting a foundation, Maya, for kids who don't get a shot otherwise. And I want you with me." I sat there, speechless, trying to process it. Ethan Caldwell, the man whose name was synonymous with power, was ready to walk away. For me, for us, for a dream I didn't even know we shared. It was too much, too fast, and yet it felt like the first clear moment in weeks. "What if it doesn't work?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What if we're not enough?" He squeezed my hands, his smile softening. "Then we'll figure it out together. But I'm betting on us." The press conference was Ethan's idea. He wanted to set the record straight, not just for the board or the investors, but for us. I was terrified. Standing in front of cameras wasn't my thing. But when he asked me to be there, I couldn't say no. Not after everything. We chose the Palmer House, neutral ground, the same place where I'd first imagined this moment back when it felt impossible. My red dress was a last-minute choice, something to remind me who I was, Maya Thompson, not a headline, not a scandal. Ethan stood beside me, his suit sharp, but his eyes nervous, like he was just as scared as I was. The room was packed. Reporters, bloggers, even a few Horizon folks in the back, their faces unreadable. When Ethan stepped to the podium, the crowd hushed, cameras flashing like lightning. He didn't waste time. "There's been a lot of noise about my personal life," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here to clear it up. Maya Thompson isn't just my business partner. She's the woman I love." The room exploded. Shouts, questions, the click of shutters, but Ethan didn't falter. He talked about the foundation, about stepping down to focus on it, about building something that mattered more than stock prices. And then he turned to me, his hand finding mine, and I felt the world shift, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. I didn't speak. Ethan had warned me the press would twist anything I said, but I didn't need to. My presence, our clasped hands, said enough. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. I was choosing us, out in the open no matter what came next. 2 years later, life looks different. Ethan's foundation is up and running, funding art programs for kids in neighborhoods like Englewood, where talent too often gets buried. He's happier than I've ever seen him, trading boardrooms for community centers, his laugh freer without the weight of a corporate crown. I started my own agency, Thompson Creative, with Tasha as my right hand and a roster of clients who followed me from Horizon. Turns out, Standing your ground gets noticed, even when it's messy. We're not naive. The world hasn't rolled out a red carpet for us. Ethan's mom still calls me his friend at family dinners, her smile tight as ever. Some industry folks still whisper when we walk into events, their eyes lingering like they're waiting for us to fail, but we've learned to let it slide, to focus on what's real. The late nights brainstorming over pizza, the mornings when Ethan burns the toast but kisses me until I forget, the quiet moments when we're just Maya and Ethan, not a headline or a fight. One evening, we're sitting on my couch, same old Wicker Park apartment because I'm too stubborn to move, listening to a blues record, the needle crackling softly. Ethan's arm is around me, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my shoulder. I'm flipping through a sketchbook, doodling ideas for a new campaign, when he speaks, his voice low. "You ever think about where we'd be if we hadn't done it?" he asks. "If we'd played it safe?" I look up, meeting his eyes. Sometimes. But then I remember I'd rather be here, with you, than anywhere else without you. He smiles, pulling me closer, and I feel it. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've chosen right, even when it's hard. Love isn't the absence of struggle, I've learned. It's the choice to face it together, to stand in the light, even when it burns. And here's what I want you to take away. The most powerful thing you can do is choose yourself, your truth, your heart, no matter who's watching. It's not easy. It's scary as hell, and it might cost you something, maybe everything. But a life half-lived, a love kept in shadows, will always leave you wondering what could have been. So step out, take the risk, and don't look back. You're worth it. If Maya and Ethan's story moved you, hit that subscribe button to catch more tales of love, courage, and defying the odds. Your support keeps these stories coming, and I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the hardest choice you've ever made for love? Let's keep this conversation going.